It was a rainy morning in Kingston, Jamaica. Seemingly a normal rainy morning. It was a Thursday. And Charles and Etta, the two main characters of this story, were in their kitchen, as they always were on Thursday mornings, eating breakfast. They were sitting across a table. They were 35 years old. Etta was sitting and she was buttering her roll. Charles was sitting, he was eating his eggs. Charles and Etta were a simple, boring, older couple. Oh, by older, I mean 35. But they had once been young. They felt that they were getting older. They felt that they were now a prematurely elderly couple, that they simply ate breakfast on Thursday mornings. Each went about their lives, went to work. Charles worked in the sugarcane trade. They would then come back in the evenings. They would sit down, listen to a radio program, go to sleep, and repeat. Etta felt very satisfied, so it seemed, with this boring life. And yet Charles began to long for something more interesting. There was opera music playing from the radio that they listened to as they were sitting and eating breakfast in the background. And this opera music, this loud opera music in the background of their kitchen began to enter Charles' heart. And Charles thought, perhaps I, too, can do something exciting like in the stories told in operas and in plays and on the radio shows that we listen to. And Charles sat at this breakfast table and he began to think, with what I have in front of me, what is the most exciting change I can make to my life? And he looked at his wife, Etta, whom he loved very much, but he came up with a very strange plan. Charles thought, I will tell my wife, Etta, that I am going to go out of town just for a few days. I'll tell her that I'm going to Trinidad on a business trip, as I often do. But in reality, even though I'll say I'm only going for 2 days, I'll leave for 5 days, but I will really just rent a house around the corner from where we live, and I will spy on my wife while I am supposedly gone to watch her miss me and watch her get worried about me. And this will be interesting and fascinating and strange, like in the operas that I hear and read about. Some people are making strange faces at this, and yes, Charles was now turning into a strange, unique, interesting person. Well, Charles told her, honey, I've got to go on a business trip. I'm going to be gone for 2 days. I'll be right back. He grabbed his briefcase, and then he went around the corner, and he went up to a house that had an apartment for rent, and he rented a room, went up the stairs inside, stayed alone for 2 days, listened to more opera music on a radio that he had in this room. At the end of 2 days, when he was supposed to come home, he then went down the street in Kingston, Jamaica, went through more misty rain, saw his wife waiting for him on their doorstep, and he stood back and he watched his wife looking for him. It was a very interesting opportunity Charles had to spy on someone that he loved. She looked nervous as she waited for Charles, who mysteriously was not coming home when he said he would be coming home. Etta thought, we're boring people. Why isn't my husband home at the time that he is supposed to be home? Well, Charles did this every day for the next few days. He would come back and watch Etta just waiting on the porch for him to come home, and he would hide in the streets in the distance. He would watch the crowds moving around him, and through the crowds, he would look at his wife on the porch, missing him, waiting for him to come home, and thinking, at the end of 5 days, I'm going to walk up to her and say, ha, it was a trick, and I have no idea how she's going to respond to that. Perhaps she'll throw me out, perhaps she'll say that she missed me, perhaps she'll think it was a funny joke, and I'm curious to see what will happen. Well, on the 5th day, Charles got out of his apartment. He walked down the stairs of this apartment. He walked along the street up to his house. He saw Etta standing on the porch once again waiting for him, and he thought, this is it. I'm going to walk right up to her. I'm going to tell her that I've been gone. I'm going to hug her and see what this strange plan has brought about. But when he went to go back to his house, it was like his feet would not work. He felt that he could not go back up to her and speak to her. Maybe he was embarrassed to tell her what he had done. Maybe he just suddenly felt he no longer belonged in his family. And he thought, I'll do it tomorrow. And he went back to his apartment. And then the next day, he looked at his wife again and thought, I'll do it tomorrow. And then the next day he thought, I'll do it tomorrow. And according to the newspaper article where this story comes from, Charles did this for the next 20 years. Every single day he would come and spy on his wife to see her missing him. He watched a police investigation to see what had happened to him. He watched his own funeral happen. He watched his wife move on. He watched her become a new and interesting person. And he just thought, it's strange and lonely to watch your family without them knowing you're watching you. One day in the rain, Charles was now 55 years old. He was in disguise so his wife would not recognize him. He ran into his wife in the market. They brushed shoulders. They shared an umbrella in the rain for a moment. She did not recognize him, and he felt what it was like to be again around his wife whom he loved. But he did not tell her who he was, and he turned away and went back to his apartment. Then one day, after 20 years of this, Charles simply felt, on a very sunny, hot day, ready to go back and see his wife. He walked up to the porch. He knocked on the door, for Etta no longer waited for him on the porch. The door opened. Charles stepped into the house, and he waited for Etta to perhaps collapse in shock, perhaps scream and think that he was a ghost. And yet, when Etta saw Charles, she simply began to laugh. And as she laughed, looking at her husband, Charles, who had been missing for 20 years, spying on her, Charles suddenly thought, oh my gosh, perhaps she knew I was doing this the entire time. Perhaps I was not spying on my wife. My wife was spying on me, spying on my wife. My wife was laughing. My wife is, in fact, the much more interesting, strange, surprising, unique person, had a much more convoluted plan, was 3 steps ahead of me. And as he was thinking this, it was as if his wife, Etta, was reading his thoughts, and she began laughing harder and harder, and Charles himself began to laugh with his wife. And never during the rest of their happy years of marriage that remained to them did they discuss what had happened during those 20 years. They would just occasionally look at each other and laugh and laugh and laugh about how strange and unique their relationship was. And now, their boring morning breakfasts every Thursday had a new energy to them when they would look at each other, and as many couples who have been together a very long time do, simply begin to laugh for seemingly no reason whatsoever. And that is the tale of Charles and Etta in Kingston. Thank you. That tale was originally authored by Jerome Ellis. But when we tell stories, they're very different every time, is something that you should know. This is a very old story that has been slightly updated. There once was an incredibly rich and powerful king in ancient Anatolia, which is what is now referred to as Turkey. And this very rich ancient king was named Croesus. And Croesus was incredibly rich and powerful. A saying that is still said in various parts of the world is, rich is King Croesus, and this is the Croesus that this refers to. And everybody knows that King Croesus in Anatolia was incredibly rich. But what not everybody knows is King Croesus in Anatolia also had magical powers. For King Croesus had been given by the gods a magical ring that he wore on his finger. And this magical ring gave King Croesus incredible wisdom and also magical powers over all of the spirits of the air, all of the demons, all of the monsters of the world, all of the animals on earth. King Croesus had power over with this magical ring. And what he used all of the demons and monsters for was they had to work as his servants. And of all of King Croesus' servants, his favorite servant was a demon servant named Asmodeus. Asmodeus hated being a demon servant of King Croesus, and yet the magical ring on King Croesus' finger made it impossible for Asmodeus to rebel. And so Asmodeus had to make breakfast for King Croesus every day, and he had to clean his dirty socks, and he had to make King Croesus's bed and draw King Croesus's bath. And every single day, Asmodeus thought, if only there was some way I could get out of serving King Croesus in this way. And one day, Asmodeus saw that King Croesus had fallen into a particularly heavy sleep after a day of partying. And Asmodeus thought, if I could just slip off his ring and put it on my own finger, perhaps I will have power over the king. And so, Asmodeus indeed was able to slip the ring with the ruby jewel off of King Croesus's finger. And then he used this ring and its magical powers to cast King Croesus out of ancient Anatolia through time. And now King Croesus was no longer King Croesus. He was swirling through time and space. And suddenly King Croesus found himself living in the year 2010 as a middle-aged man named Zhuan Yu working in a dim sum factory on Forsyth and Canal just downtown. And according to the ancient story, King Croesus was no longer King Croesus. He was now just working, making dumplings all day and every day. And none of the other men that worked in the factory with formerly King Croesus, now middle-aged Zhuan Yu, knew that really this person that they were folding dumplings with every single day had in fact previously in Anatolia ruled millions and millions of people, had run with armies through the deserts, had demons and monsters working on his behalf. He simply was quiet, friendly Zhuan Yu. He told good jokes sometimes. He would play cards with them at the base of the Manhattan Bridge. And they didn't know that when Zhuan Yu would take walks down to the East River and look out across it, he was really thinking, I once ruled even greater lands than the city of New York. Well, eventually, after years of this, Zhuan Yu forgot all about the fact that he used to be King Croesus in Anatolia, and he accepted his life making dumplings. He had good friends that he would play cards with. He learned even better jokes that he could tell while working in the dim sum factory. And then, one day, while working in the dim sum factory, there was suddenly a big explosion, and flour went everywhere. And the dim sum factory itself began almost to collapse upon itself, and everyone ran out and escaped from it. And when they looked at each other and looked at their white faces covered in powder, they thought, where's Zhuan Yu? Because in fact, by this point, Zhuan Yu was now hurtling backwards through time because one of King Croesus's sons had now stolen the ring back from Asmodeus, the demon, and had used it to bring King Croesus, formerly Zhuan Yu, back to ancient Anatolia, restored him as king so that no demon could ever steal the power again, threw the ring into the depths of the Mediterranean Sea, and now once again King Croesus was King Croesus. But as he ruled over millions of people again and led armies through the desert and had servants bringing him food and jewels all the time, he would think to himself secretly, I miss making dumplings on Forsyth and Canal. I miss the beautiful food that is dim sum. I was not made to be a king. I really long for my simple, hard work, my breaks, playing cards with my friends. And I instead will have to live the rest of my days as a king, longing for my days eating unlimited, free, delicious dim sum. And that is the end of the tale of King Croesus of Anatolia.
I'm just going to play a little music, and then we'll be done. Thank you.